Good evening, everyone. First, thank you for joining us today. Thank you for those who are here in person, and welcome to those of you who are online. And I see we do have a great turnout online, and I'm sure more will continue to join. So again, thank you for joining us and attending the 8th Annual Community Engaged Research Lecture, where we will honor and hear from Dr. David Schade. Before we get started with that, it is very important to honor our past and acknowledge our past as well. And we like to do that with UNM land acknowledgement. Founded in 1889, the University of New Mexico sits on the traditional homelands of the Pueblo of Sandia. The original peoples of New Mexico, Pueblo, Navajo, and Apache, since time immemorial, have deep connections to the land and have made significant contributions to the broader community statewide. We honor the land itself and those who remain stewards of this land throughout the generations, and also acknowledge our committed relationship to Indigenous peoples. We gratefully recognize our history. Part of our recent history here at the University of New Mexico is what we are here to celebrate tonight, the Community Engaged Research Lecture Award that was established in 2016. CERL, like we call it, is one of the highest honors that UNM can bestow upon its faculty here at UNM, and it's in recognition of exemplary community engaged research. And tonight's honoree is no exception. The UNM Faculty Senate's Research Policy Committee looks for faculty members whose work not only addresses a community problem, but follows through with identification, assessment, planning, implementation, and evaluation of outcomes and impacts within that community. Normally, we'd have someone much more important than me up here welcoming you, but unfortunately tonight, Dr. Ellen Fisher, Vice President for Research here at UNM, could not be with us here today. She's in Washington, D.C., attending another UNM Community Center event, but she does send her regards. Additionally, Executive Vice President for Health Sciences, Doug Zidonis, is not able to attend, but he did want to send his regards and actually recorded a message for us to view and for Dr. Schade. So if I do things right, we can play that.
Hello and welcome to everyone in the audience and online. I'm Doug Zidonis, the CEO for the UNM Health System and Executive Vice President for Health Sciences. I'm sorry I can't be there with you tonight, and I hope you have a great evening. Tonight we are celebrating research at the University of New Mexico, and in particular celebrating the exceptional scholarly work by Dr. David Schade and his team. Dr. Schade will be delivering UNM's 8th Annual Community Engaged Research Lecture. UNM has a long and rich history making contributions to scientific discovery. And the research we do across UNM's Health and Health Science campus continues to advance our knowledge in all areas of health, and we hope this will continue to make safer and healthier communities. As a physician scientist myself, I greatly value our research mission, and I'm thrilled to be at UNM with so many great faculty, staff, and students. The Searle Award brings focus to UNM's commitment to community engagement. This research award honors a scientist who has had a profound and systemic impact on the relationship between the university and the larger community in a positive and meaningful way. This is our highest award for community engaged scholarship. Congratulations, Dr. Schade. You are an amazing scientist, leader, and colleague. We are all so proud of your accomplishments in research and the way you mentor and demonstrate team science and team building. Thank you. I continue to learn so much from you and be inspired by you. I also hear from your patients, how compassionate and wise you are, including how they believe you have literally saved their lives. Dr. Schade is an endocrinologist who serves as the chief of our division of endocrinology and metabolism, where he is also the vice chair of research in the Department of Internal Medicine. He has been here at UNM 40 years and been the principal investigator on multiple large multi-center clinical studies involving diabetes and cardiovascular research. He has published over 700 publications, has at least $30 million of research funding, and many other accolades. Dr. Shade's program of research has a principal goal to improve the health of the United States population, irrespective of race, income status, or other factors. His early studies focused on lipid metabolism and the effect of glucagon on free fatty acids and ketones. This area transitioned into a focus on diabetes and cardiovascular disease, including his community-facing research on how to better prevent heart disease in both diabetic and non-diabetic individuals. His research has included critical clinical trial studies, including the efficacy of glipizide and the role of antioxidant vitamins in reducing cardiovascular risk factors. Dr. Shade has also been a principal investigator on numerous large multi-center clinical trials, including on diabetes control and complication, diabetes prevention, and also glycemia reduction approaches in diabetes and Vision Quest. He staffs a weekly cardiovascular risk factor prevention clinic in which patients with and without diabetes attend. He was instrumental in setting up the coronary artery calcium scanning at both the University Hospital and our partner VA hospital. This has led to important research publications and even a book on preventing heart disease, and he gives this to his patients at no charge. In 2021, Dr. Shade worked with the emeritus professor, Dr. Phil Eaton, to persuade the New Mexico legislature to mandate that health insurance plans cover the cost of coronary artery calcium scans. They're now trying to get that in Medicare also. As you can see, Dr. Shade is an incredible scientist, physician, and community-engaged leader. He is truly passionate about saving lives and is dedicated to improving the health of New Mexicans. I'm in awe of all that he has accomplished. I'm honored to be making this introduction. Thank you, David, for your passion for scientific discovery and for translating that to addressing health equity and emphasizing the importance of being community engaged. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Shade with a warm applause. Hello and welcome to everyone.
Thank you, Dr. Sidonis, and thank you to our colleagues at HSC Communications for taking the time to record that video and put it together. Before we hear from Dr. Shade, it is my pleasure now to introduce longtime colleague and friend of Dr. Shade, Dr. Philip Eaton.
Thank you. I'm very pleased to be here to introduce Dave to the community by Zoom and in the room. The reason this is a special opportunity and a special event is that Dr. Shade is a very unusual person. He is not the typical faculty member. He actually is a scientist, a clinical scientist, who has spent his career so far, of which I've been a part of for almost 50 years. He spent his clinical career really interested in public health and in the diseases, one of the areas of public health which are so crucial is that of chronic disease. The reason for that is that chronic disease, as I'm just visualizing it for you, chronic disease is a disease that comes from our own bodies, that each of us has the capability of developing these chronic diseases. Now, to make two that Dr. Shade is involved with, to make it clear to you, diabetes is one, and sugar is the metabolite. We all make sugar and use it, and we make it in our own cells. The one he's talking about today is atherosclerosis. And cholesterol is the metabolite. We all make cholesterol and use it for our good purposes. The reason this talk is so important, and the reason is because now, as a public, because everybody can produce cholesterol, we all have the same enzymes that take it away and that use it. We all have the same genes to do this, that can also take it away or make it abnormal. So as a public health issue, it is way more lethal than COVID. COVID, you've got to get the virus. For this, you already have all the tools to have terrible heart disease caused by cholesterol. The reason that Dr. Shade is so key to understand clarifying this for us is his training is heavily involved in being in Washington at the National Institute of Health. He was there early on in his career, serving in the military and the public health service, and then back and forth, invited there to participate in the design of research, clinical research, to ask how do medications, what medications will help us and how should we find them. The FDA found this so valuable that they asked him to serve on their committees for 6 years to look directly at new drugs and help explain whether they should or should not improve them. There are very few faculty of academia that have the background that is important enough to have the FDA ask for their consultation and the National Institutes of Health ask for their consultation. Today, Dr. Shade has a goal which most lecturers do not have. And that is, because this is a public health issue, the public has to be involved in this solution. That's why he went to the legislature. That's why he was involved with Sandia Labs. That's why he's gone to the NIH. That's why the FDA called him in. But he needs all of you, all of us, to find ways to find everybody the possibility to know if they have a problem and to get it treated. That's different. That's why he's much more than a faculty member. He really is a clinical scientist who has spent his career and continues in his career to help you and to help me. And he needs your help to tell others about what we will all learn today. Thank you.
Well, I'm just overwhelmed by that introduction. I just don't know what part of it to believe. Oh, I want to thank everybody for coming today. It's sort of late in the afternoon, and we have a lot of people who have also zoomed in. And I'm doing something I've never done at any talk. So if it doesn't work, I apologize and I hope you'll forgive me. I've added some movies to this talk, and I'm not sure they're going to work, but I thought they'd make a point. And I got these movies. I didn't make the movies themselves. I got them from the internet. And after this first movie, I'll give credit to the person who actually made these clips. These clips are only 3 minutes long, but I certainly want to give credit to the people who think as I do. And I thought maybe if I showed you some clips, it wouldn't just be me saying this. So today, let's see, I guess. Do I have So first, of course, I'd like to thank the hundreds of people who've helped me through all the years of doing these studies. And actually, the names are, if I went through the names, we wouldn't have any time for the talk. So I hope my colleagues, my support staff, my students, my patients, and my research patients who volunteer for all the studies that we do, I thank every one of them. And I just don't have time to name each one, and I hope they forgive me for that. I do want to, however, cite particularly 3 people who really do all the work or thinking in my particular life. And if I can get this to work. Yeah, first is Carolyn King, who is my administrative assistant, who basically does all the work in my office. And I consider her the chief there. And I do whatever she says, and whatever she says is usually correct. So that's why I follow her. And she's been with me for at least 20 years. This plug in just not turned up over there. It's like everything else, you have to plug it in these days for it to work. Anyway, And then Elizabeth Duran Valdez is probably the best trial coordinator that I've ever had, and really does all the work on all the studies that I have done for the last 15 or 20 years. And she is an amazing woman who just has boundless energies and intelligence. And then finally, it's Phil Eaton, who you just met, who really is, I consider, the brains of the outfit. He is the best investigator I have personally ever met. And I was his fellow as I was being trained. And he really taught me everything that I know, which may not be a lot, about the search. And I can't thank him enough for his guidance. And I continue to work with him on multiple projects. Now, community is really any group of individuals who have a common interest and purpose or goal. And I live in this community, as we all do here. And it's a wonderful community. I've been here for many years. And I can see, and it's made up of our staff, it's made up of our physicians and our patients and everybody. And we all have just one goal, and that is to improve the health of people in New Mexico and the United States. And we want everybody in New Mexico to be healthy and happy and live a long life. And it's a challenge. We know it's a challenge, and we work every day at it. And we all benefit from this just terrific community that we're in. Okay, now to get directly to the topic at hand. This, unfortunately, is a very common event in New Mexico. 7,000 times a year, that's one every hour, 7,000 hours in a year. The emergency medical services gets called for a cardiac arrest. That's a huge number of people. And half these people will die before they ever get to the hospital. And so we should do something about this. It's the #1 killer in our state. And it turns out that everybody has a choice in life. You can be in the box or you can carry the box. And I think I'm hoping one of my goals of this talk is to convince you that we all can carry the box and we don't have to bury our friends in the box. Okay, so this is his first clip. And if I get it to work. It lasts about 3 minutes, so bear with me.
My whole life, I've been an athlete. I've been a husband. I've been an attorney. People have always relied upon me to provide for them. On May 6, 2009, I was playing softball on a field just like the one behind me. Sat down in the dugout in between innings. Had no warning signs, no complaints. I didn't feel sick or anything like that. Next thing you know, I woke up in an ambulance, somebody telling me how lucky I was. What happened, I learned, is that I was sitting in the dugout and I just passed over. I was clinically dead for 3 to 5 minutes. I was told I had no pulse. I was turning blue. Fortunately, two mothers kept me sustainable by doing CPR on me, and I woke up in the ambulance. I didn't know what happened, and the ambulance driver said to me, "You're a very lucky guy," and I really couldn't figure out why I was so lucky.
Not everybody is so lucky. Every minute of every day, somebody dies of a heart attack in America. It's the nation's biggest killer. More frightening than that is that a huge number of the people who die drop dead without any warning they've got heart disease.
About a third of patients, the first event is sudden death. And the reason is the disease is silent.
When I got to the hospital, they told me there were 2 major blockages in my left anterior descending artery. It's called the Widowmaker. It's a 99 and a 95% blockage. And they said it was an absolute miracle that I was still there.
2/3 of men and half of all women, the first sign or symptom is that they have a heart attack or die. You don't know you have it until you're dead.
And it doesn't have to be that way.
Heart attacks and strokes are absolutely preventable. The science is a slam dunk.
Unfortunately, for some big businesses, making money takes precedence over saving lives.
They don't want them to die, but they don't necessarily want them to get better.
Okay, so that was the first clip. So I'm going to ask you a few questions during this talk, and I know we can't vote, but just try to think of the answer that you would have. So the first question I'd like to ask you, how many people do you know who have had a heart attack? So just think about that for a second. So the correct answer is probably 100. And you'd probably disagree with that. And I'm going to try to convince you that you're wrong, that the answer is probably 100. So let's look at some of the people that you know, but never recognized that they had a heart attack. Okay, everybody knows John Candy, died at the age of 43. Everybody knows Peter Sellers. Everybody knows Red Fox. Everybody knows James Gandolfino. And I thought he looked very healthy here. But he died at the age of 51 of a heart attack. Here's Andy Griffith. Here's Dick Clark. I want to take a minute to say something about Robert Shaw. You may not recognize him right away, but you've seen him in the movies. He's been in a lot of movies, but probably the most famous one was in Jaws, where he was the boat captain, that at the very end, they were chasing this big white shark. He got eaten by the shark. I'm sure you all remember that. So every time I have a bad day at work, I go home because my grants weren't funded or my manuscripts aren't accepted. I have lots of bad days. I think of Robert Shaw and I say, it could be worse. And I'll show you how bad it could be. Here it is. This is a bad day at work right here. And this can't be any worse. So I really don't have any bad days at work at all, because I just think of the big white shark eating me up. So this is Robert Shaw, and I'm sure you saw the movie, but this is my definition of a bad day at work. I'll just go through a few more people that you know who had heart attacks. James Garner. Lee Van Cleef is my favorite bad guy. Every movie he makes, he is the bad guy. And I'm sure you saw this movie with Clint Eastwood, The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. You can see him in the center there as the bad guy. The other thing he's done is make a lot of bad movies. He's a bad guy making bad movies. And I'll show you one of his movies, Death Rides a Horse, a terrible movie. But if you look at him up in the corner there, I would say that if you can't draw faster than that, you'd be dead. So he is one tough hombre, and he's a terrific bad guy, but he wasn't bad enough to beat a heart attack. He died of a heart attack. As tough as he is, he died of a heart attack. Everybody knows Roy Orbison and the wonderful song that he wrote, died at 52 in his prime. Here's Lee Marvin. Everybody knows Lee Marvin, seen him in a number of movies. He died at 63. Who's on first? He died at 52. These are terrible. I could go on and on, trust me. Fact is, I was watching Inherit the Wind with Spencer Tracy last night. Terrific movie. And I said, whatever happened to Spencer Tracy? So I went on the internet. He died at 65 of a heart attack. I could go on and on and on, but I'm going to change to women for a minute, because I think there's something here we need to learn. Here's Carrie Fisher, who killed more stormtroopers than anybody in this room with her laser guns. Everybody saw Star Wars, and yet she dies of a heart attack at 60. Here's Zsa. She did live a long, happy life. I always thought that the 9th husband was probably too much for her, but she died of a heart attack. And the one that was just in the newspaper a month ago was Elvis Presley's daughter, who was at the Golden Globes and died of a heart attack right there. And most people are not thinking that women actually die of heart attacks. But so I want to show you something. here is a picture of any middle-aged women, or so to speak. And I want to convey a fact to you that I didn't know about. And this is a fact, is that in 2020, 42,000 women died of breast cancer in the United States. In contrast, 314,000 women died of heart disease. Now, that happens to be a ratio of 7 to 1. Now, every woman knows about breast cancer. And why is that? Because the American Cancer Society has done a wonderful job of educating and informing women. And women get a mammogram every year or 2 years. They know that if they prevent that disease, they're way much better off. But how many women actually consider that heart attacks are a much bigger threat than breast cancer? It's not that breast cancer is not important, it's very important. It's just that heart attacks are much more likely to kill them on a ratio of 7 to 1. And yet, what are we doing about it? What are we doing about this killer? Okay. Now I'm going to show you my next video here. If I can get it. I think you'll recognize Larry.
Well, that night on the 23rd, I was doing my CNN show, interviewed Dr. C. Everett Koop, the Surgeon General of the United States. At the end of the interview, he asked me if I was still smoking. I said yes, and he said, you know, you don't look good. I said, I feel fine. He said, I don't like the way you look. You ought to see a doctor. So I said, okay, and then I went to do my all-night radio show. And my guest was David Halberstam, the late David Halberstam, terrific writer. And at the end of that interview, he said, are you feeling okay? I said, why? He said, you don't look good. Apparently I had a gray pallor. So I went back home and I got off the air. It was about 4 in the morning, and I had this terrible pain in my right shoulder. I'd never experienced that kind of pain before. I didn't have chest pain, and it was going down my arm. And I didn't know what to do. I called my doctor and woke him up. And he said, well, right side sounds like a gallbladder. Why don't you go to the hospital in the morning? So first thing in the morning, my producer picked me up and drove me over to George Washington University Hospital. So I walked into the emergency room. This man came up to me, and they have viewers in the emergency room who look at people to see how. And he said, are you a heart patient? And I said, no. And he said, well, you don't look good. And that's the 3rd time I've heard you don't look good. And they came over and took some blood tests. And then they went over to a screen, and they were looking at the screen, and this blood test came up on the screen. Suddenly they turned around, and the doctor and nurses, blue light went off, and they came running toward me. And I said to my producer, I don't think this is a pulled muscle. The doctor came right over and he said, Mr. King, you're having a heart attack. And I said, am I gonna die? And he said, good question. And he said, we don't have the answer, but it's the right side, and that's a good sign because right sides generally do better than the left side. I wound up with a quintuple bypass. That was much scarier than a heart attack. When the doctor explained to me, we're gonna cut open your chest. Oh, that's nice. And we're gonna pull you apart and put you on a heart-lung machine and move the heart a little and do a bypass, which is similar to a highway with a blocked exit, and then we're gonna go around the exit. We take veins from your leg, and the veins will circulate around, and we hope you do well. It changed my life that day. I never felt better after that. I recovered pretty quickly. Came home from the hospital, vowed to get healthy, lost a lot of weight, changed my diet, never smoked again. You know, my wife believes in the afterlife. I don't want to ride the bet.
Okay, so the question we all ask all the time is a heart attack preventable? And the answer is very clearly yes, it's totally preventable. And then why are we having it? Well, we're going to look at it for a minute here. So I hope you can see this. If you look up over there, you see an 80% blockage in a coronary artery. You can see that it's very narrow. And if one didn't do anything, eventually this would probably clot off. But it's totally reversible medically. And here's an example of a similar left anterior descending coronary artery that looks the same. 3 years on medication, you can see it on the right, totally back to its normal diameter. This is a reversible, preventable disease. So what is a heart attack? It's not rocket science. It's actually very simple. Very simple. Too much cholesterol circulates around in the blood. It's picked up by the artery, forms this plaque, as you see these cholesterol crystals here. Eventually, they break into the artery itself, and a blood clot forms on top of them and obstructs the artery, and you end up with a heart attack. So this is not rocket science. We know what causes this. So the question is, what is the best way to prevent a heart attack? And Philly and I have been addressing that question for the last 10 years. And we think we know what the answer is, and I want to share it with you today. It's a calcium heart scan. I'm going to show you what that is. But it's easy to think about as the same thing as being a heart mammogram. So let's take a look at it. It's totally non-invasive. We'll show you what it is. So it's a very simple concept. It's a CT scan that takes multiple cuts through the heart. As you're lying on the table, it's all done within 10 minutes. There's no preparation. You just lie down there, and in 10 minutes, you're done. You get up and leave. I want to show you what it actually looks like when the radiologist does these cuts. So you can see on the left is patient number 1. This is a cut right through the heart. And it's showing actually the left anterior descending artery. And you can see there's no white calcium on the left. But if you look at a different patient who has a positive calcium score of 435, you can see there's calcium in that coronary artery. And that means there's plaque. Okay, I'm going to show you a picture just like this on the next slide of what the radiologist is really looking for. So if you look at this picture, you'll notice that the white are basically bones. You see the spine, it's white. You see the breastbone and you see the rib. And in the center of this chest is the heart. And on the next slide, I'm going to show you almost the same picture. And we're going to take multiple cuts right through that heart quickly. And so what I would like you to do is to look for the calcium. And I'll do it over and over to give you a chance, because the first time I totally missed it. It went right through. Okay, there it is. It just went right through. We're just making multiple cuts. We're going to start again. Right there. You see that calcium there in the anterior descending artery on the right? Let's take a look again. Right there. That's what the radiologist looks for. And every pixel that's white is counted. They count up the pixels, and that's your score. So the more calcium, the more pixels, the more score. It's a very simple test, totally not invasive, takes 10 minutes. And you can see it over and over, and now you can see that calcium showing up. Now you see the calcium in the backbone at the bottom, and the rib on the right, but what we're interested in is what the heart is doing. So what are they actually looking at? Here is a cut through a coronary artery that has calcium in it, and you can see the calcium plaque there. And if you have calcium, you have plaque, because the body tries to wall off the plaque. The body does not. This is one of your defense mechanisms. When you have a cholesterol plaque in your artery, the body doesn't like it. And the only defense it's really got is to try to wall it off, unless you really lower your cholesterol. But assuming you don't change anything, and you continue smoking and do this. The only defense the body has is to try to wall it off with calcium. And that's why the calcium is there, because the body is trying to get rid of the plaque, and the only way it knows how. Now, here's a question that you can answer. Which of these, who needs a calcium heart scan? Now, you look at these 5 people, all right? And when I look at that, I'd say, well, the gentleman on the right might, and maybe that gentleman on the left that's in a little bit. But in fact is, all of them need a calcium heart scan, because it turns out there's no way to predict who has heart disease and who doesn't without a calcium scan. You can have no risk factors, but you have a genetic predisposition that you don't know about, and you have plaques in your coronary arteries. Diabetes is one of my really important topics that I address, and it's a big risk factor for heart disease. And all diabetic patients should have a calcium heart scan by the age of 40, and everybody else should have one by the age of 50. If you have no risk factors, you ought to have one by 50. You have hypertension, if you smoke, if you have diabetes, you should have one by the age of 40 if you want to save your life. So what's the good news? There's always good news. The good news is this test. It's non-invasive. They don't even start an IV. Minimal radiation. It's the same thing as living in Albuquerque for 3 months. Same thing. And I don't see a lot of people on the road moving out because of a little background radiation. It's inexpensive, and we'll address that in a minute. It takes 10 minutes, widely available. I'll show you that in a minute too. And there's no false positives. If you have calcium, you have plaques. There aren't many tests that meet this criteria. Okay, so I always ask the question, if this is such a great test, who always gets this test, and why don't I get this test? Well, let me show you who has to have this test now. All presidents, all right, all astronauts, and all pilots. Now, these people are special, and they're special, of course, but why shouldn't we get the same test that they have to get it in order to do their job? Okay. So let's look at another issue here.
Well, the family history has always been horrible. It goes back a few generations. I have the disease, and it's extremely aggressive. My body cannot synthesize the good cholesterol you need or rid itself of the bad cholesterol. My first open heart surgery was at the age of 38, and my second one would have been about 51.
Rene has a double bypass in 2007, which saves his life. The surgery is prompted by a scan which shows a 90% blockage in one artery. After 2 conventional tests, an EKG and a stress test, had said he was completely fit.
I have a very low opinion of an EKG. I've had 2 EKGs that were absolutely told me I was fine when I wasn't, when I was, in fact, very near death. The sophistication now with CAT scans and getting the calcium scoring and these other things is just really critical.
5 weeks after his surgery, Rene starts a crusade. He's a Texas senator. He drafts a bill that will force insurers to pay for the screening of all Texan men over 45 and all women over 55.
It's really hard to rock the foundation of the insurance industry and even public opinion on a lot of things. But I felt the only way was to mandate these tests.
Mr. Speaker, members, can I get your attention, please, just for a second, everybody?
He's also taking on America's #1 heart doctor. Steve Nissen is just finishing his term as president of the American College of Cardiology.
Yeah, well, there were some questionable characters that were trying to promote this. And of course, you know, Texas, while it is part of the United States, seems to operate with somewhat different, you know, character than some parts of the country. And almost anything goes in Texas, and I was certainly not in favor of that.
Doctors came up to me and say that this is just a bill to help a couple of vendors out on this. I said, no, Doc, let me tell you my story and why I believe in this. It saved my life. And if it saved mine, it can save others.
Yeah, I think you call them shameless self-promoters.
Yeah, I think I probably use the term like that. I've not been known to mince words when it comes to that sort of approach to medicine.
Any tool that helps us detect it is worth it, particularly as inexpensive as this test is.
All those in favor say aye. All those opposed, nay. Ayes have it. House Bill 1290 is passed and engrossed.
After 2 years of furious debate, victory. Rene Oliveira's bill passes in both Texas houses to the intense and enduring disbelief of its opponents.
Having passionate true believers does not make a test worthwhile. And so I would say that the test has actually been a huge failure.
Well, he's an idiot, and he's probably still in dinosaur times in terms of his thinking. As long as he stays in Cleveland, that's good, because we don't need his opinions in Texas, because I know what I did has saved a lot of lives, and I'm proud of that.
Okay, so Texas passed this bill about 7 years ago, and the only state in the nation that did. So what about New Mexico? How much does a calcium CT cost in New Mexico? I want to tell you a little story here. So anybody who's been to Santa Fe has seen this statue of young people, young Republicans pulling against young Democrats and so forth. It's a wonderful little statue. This is the Roundhouse big auditorium where all the business gets taken, where the votes get taken and so forth. And of course, our legislature just finished their yearly meeting. But I want to show you this one because, as you know, if you've tried to pass a bill, you cannot submit a bill to the state legislature. You have to have either a representative or a senator of New Mexico submit the bill and carry it through to all the committees. And I want to point out this right there, Christine Trujillo, who championed the bill for New Mexico to make the insurance companies pay for this test. And of course, you can see Phil Eaton there on the left. And if you look real carefully at that piece of paper in front of his left hand, that's actually a calcium scan that he's got open. And Christine there is talking to the whole chamber, saying this is something we have to do for our citizens. So believe it or not, I'm sure you do believe it, it takes forever to get something passed in New Mexico. It took Texas 2 years. It took New Mexico 3 years. But they finally did pass it. And here's our governor. And she finally did sign the bill. And here you can see she's signing our bill. And you can see Christine Trujillo, who we just think the world of with Philip and I, getting this bill passed. And I want to just note that Blue Cross Blue Shield got up and supported our bill, which I'm sure convinced a lot of the legislatures that this was a good thing. And Blue Cross didn't do it because they're nice people. I'm sure they are nice people. But they did it because they realized they'd save a lot of money if they could prevent heart attacks. So here in New Mexico, now there's only 2 states in the whole country that have this passed, believe it or not. If you have Medicaid, it's free, it's a government, and they decided this was a good thing. If you have health insurance in New Mexico, then it's by law, and I can send you the law, it's free. Unfortunately, if you're Medicare, it's not free, and it's about $150 to $200. And we have written Medicare, we've had our senators and congressmen write Medicare, and we're trying to force them to get smart because it will save them millions of dollars. And yet we have not yet been able to convince them to do that. So what do I do about people who say Well, $150, gee. I always ask them one question, what's your life worth? And they always tell me, oh, it's worth millions of dollars, millions of dollars. And I always try to figure out, well, if they won't spend $150 to save their life, how could it be worth millions of dollars? I've never been able to, that's a conundrum I'm still working on at night. Haven't quite figured that out, but I've had people call me and say, I'm not going to do it because it costs $150. And these were wealthy people who were actually retirees from the University of New Mexico. They were educated people, and yet they refused to spend $150 to save their life. I'll just give you a little example of cost. If you have a heart attack, after you've paid all the bills, you pay the hospital, you pay the doctors, you pay for the medicines, you pay the nurses, and the follow-up, it's $100,000 on the average, $100,000. If you take that same $100,000, you can actually get a coronary artery calcium scan and treat a patient for 1,000 years for the same price. And usually most of us don't live 1,000 years, so you actually save money. This is a no-brainer as far as money saving is concerned. Okay, so let's get down to the nitty-gritty. What does a calcium score? What if you're 200? What if you're 300? What if you're 400? What does that mean? It tells you your chance of having a heart attack in the next 5 years. Okay, this is the only diagram I'm going to show you with data on it. But you can see on the left here is your percentage chance of having a heart attack, and over 5 years. And let's suppose you have a score of 300. Well, at the end of 5 years, you have a 10% chance of having a heart attack. Now the score goes from 0 to 3,500. So you can imagine if I plotted 1,000 up there, you have a heart attack, your chance of having a heart attack would be 80% in a year. So the coronary calcium tells you what's your chance of having a heart attack. Okay, so here's the question that's always asked, and it's a legitimate question. What is the data? What is the proof that you can prevent heart attacks? Well, in our clinics, this is our community. Everybody recognizes we have wonderful clinics, wonderful facilities. It's a wonderful place. And for the last 5 years, as was mentioned, I've been running a heart attack prevention clinic based on calcium scores. So we looked at all those people who I have in my clinic over the 5 years. And basically, I had 140 people with positive scores, ranging all the way from 10 up to 3,500. Now, of that group of 140, I prescribed some medication with no side effects, but 20 of the people decided they didn't want to take any pills. But 120 decided they would take the pills. So we looked at these people to see whether there was a difference between heart attacks in the group. And it was very easy to do because we just used the same graph. We took each individual, plotted them on the graph, said, what's their chance of a heart attack, added them all up, and looked at what we got. And this is what we found. Over the 5 years, in the 20 people on the left, from their calcium score, we predicted statistically it'd be 1.8 heart attacks, but it rounded out. And we actually saw 2 people. 2 of those people had heart attacks in the 5 years. Well, what about the 120 people that took the pills? Now, they had the same types of scores to begin with. And we predicted we'd see 10.5 heart attacks, because look at how many more people. There's 6 times more people in that group than this. So 6 times 2 is very close to 10.5. Well, how many people had a heart attack in this group? We looked at that, and we didn't see one, not one. We think this is pretty good evidence that you can prevent heart attacks. It may not be 100%, but it's pretty good. And we published this. I'm very proud of this publication, not because I published it, but because the first author is a medical student. The second author is a UNM student. The third author is the brains of the outfit. The fourth author is the one who did all the work, and I was just an observer. So this was a study that was done by the collection of people at our great university here and our great community. Okay, now I want to just address this question. Now, let me tell you why this question is important. If you believe that, and it may be true, that your heart attacks or your heart disease, let's say your heart disease, starts at the age of, let's say, 30 or as a teenager. Well, if it's 30, you really don't have to do a calcium scan to maybe you're 50 or 60. On the other hand, if you think that heart disease may start as a teenager, maybe you want to get a calcium scan a little earlier. So what is your answer to this question? Well, most people would say, well, the late teenage years or whatever. Well, I think you might be surprised with the answer. It actually starts before birth. Heart disease starts before birth, and I'll show you why. When you were about 2 months of age, we all remember it, of course, it turns out that it's very important that the placenta make estrogens to prevent an abortion. But it also turns out at that early stage of 2 months, the placenta is not very mature and can't do too much. It doesn't have a lot of enzymes. And one of the problems is it can't make cholesterol very well because it takes 24 enzymatic steps to make one cholesterol molecule. That's a long process. Whereas if you take cholesterol, it only takes 3 enzymatic steps to make estrogens. So what happens is the fetal liver is very good from the beginning at making cholesterol. That's its total goal. So it makes cholesterol, puts it into the bloodstream, goes to the placenta picks it up, and easily makes enough estrogen to keep you from being aborted. And we should all thank the estrogen and your placenta and so forth. Well, it turns out later in life, things get better. But let me show you, if you look at a fetal artery at 2 months, what do you see? You see this. This is an oil red O stain for cholesterol and fat. And you can see in this vessel wall that you're already starting to get collections of fat from all that cholesterol that's circulating around. Your cholesterol actually in the fetus is very high early on. But later on in fetal development, about month 8, 7, 8, and 9, the placenta is mature enough to make its own cholesterol. So the liver stops making it, and your cholesterol level in your blood drops, and this all disappears. So when you were born, your cholesterol level is 50, which is a very low level. The average American cholesterol here is very close to 120, 130, 110. It's well over. So you can see 50 is very, very low. And so all this gets cleared out, but it starts when you're a fetus. Okay, so when you're born, your cholesterol is 50, you're in good shape. And everybody remembers when you were here, and I always wish I was there, because you didn't have to worry about food or anything. All you worried about was your teddy bear, all right? And so you were born very healthy. Your cholesterol was 50, you have a long life in front of you, but something happens. Your mother comes into your room and says, Johnny or Mary, let's have a party. Let's have a party. And you say, yay, we have a party. So at the age of 4 or 5, you had a party. But the problem was this. I'll show you what the problem is. Here's the problem. This is where you had your party, right? And this was, everybody had a great time, except for your coronary arteries, which were in pain and screaming, but nobody listened to them. And unfortunately, some of this behavior continued throughout life. So all this cholesterol from all these French fries and Big Macs and whatever are plugging up your arteries. So things were great, except things were not good inside. So cholesterol is a fat and it's not water soluble, so it can't dissolve in your blood. So it forms these little balls, And it circulates as little balls between the red cells, circulates around, gets stuck sometimes in the arteries. Now, I looked at this And you're probably saying, well, that's very pretty. But that's not the real, that's an artist's rendition of a cholesterol ball. And you really want to see a real cholesterol ball. So I understand that. So I got out my microscope and I actually took a picture of these cholesterol circulating around in the blood. And I was amazed at what I saw. And I want to show you this because I think you'll be amazed too. So this is what these balls actually look. And this is why I don't eat Big Macs. It ruined my whole behavior. But this is just cholesterol circulating around in you and me and everybody else. And what you don't want is too many of these Big Macs at one time. Okay, so what happens to these Big Macs or these cholesterol balls? Well, this is actually a heart muscle autopsy where they have washed the blood out of the vessel so you can see, and then fill the vessel just with saline. And you can see what happens. These are cholesterol streaks. This is how a heart attack begins, with cholesterol plaques, just like this. And of course, it gets worse and worse, and we smoke and we have hypertension and everything gets worse. And eventually all your arteries tend to look like this. Now, just to show you a comparison, and these are true pictures, when you're born, you have a very nice, smooth artery. Now, if I took a picture as an adult, this is what it would look like. These are cholesterol plaques in your arteries that you hope don't explode in your arteries and block it all. So now I'm going to show you another video. And I always thought, space, the final frontier, Star Trek was a great place. But even heart attacks can happen in space. So let's see here.
7, 6, 3, 2, 0, and liftoff.
Like Steve Cohen, NASA's astronauts are outwardly extremely fit and health conscious. For just when it looked like coronary artery scanning was dead, salvation in the most unlikely place: space.
We've long known that cardiovascular disease is the greatest risk that we face, especially given our population. Most astronauts are middle-aged males. The consequences for us are dire. We're talking about people dying in space.
The agency had had a real scare in 1971 with Apollo 15. At the time, NASA hailed it as the most successful mission so far.
Looks like pristine material, all right.
On the surface of the moon, Commander David Scott and lunar module pilot Jim Irwin did 3 moonwalks, collected a vast array of moon rocks, and drove a lunar rover for the first time.
Man, this is really a rock and roller ride, isn't it?
But out of sight of the cameras, once Irwin was back in the command module, instruments appear to show all the symptoms of a serious cardiac event. After anguished debate, Mission Control realized that breathing the oxygen of Endeavour's cabin and living in zero gravity, Irwin might as well be in a hospital intensive care unit.
Then, on August 7th, they looked into the fireball created by the heat of their re-entry into the Earth's atmosphere at 25,000 miles per hour.
The mission made it back safely. But a few months after he landed, Jim Irwin had a massive heart attack.
We became aware of coronary calcium scoring probably in the early 2000s. There were a number of us who were interested in improving our risk predictions. We had a couple of individuals who are involved in our various flight operations have acute coronary syndrome events prior to a mission. In both those cases, we got lucky.
From 2006 on, all potential astronauts have to have a 0 score or they don't get in. But it isn't only astronauts who are at risk.
Okay, so let's we're gonna wind up here a little bit, but let's get closer to home and talk about Albuquerque. Who has had a heart attack in Albuquerque? Many people that you and I know, and I'm gonna just show you a couple here. So let's look at one. I was actually watching Netflix one evening and I was watching this Better Call Saul, and I was on the 5th season. It was halfway through and it was all tension, and all of a sudden it stopped. It stopped, and I never knew why. And then in the newspaper it said that Bob Odenkirk, who was also, of course, in a lot of other movies, but starred in Better Call Saul, had a heart attack right here in Albuquerque, and thank God he survived. But of course, it disrupted and stopped the whole episode of this series of movies. And you know, we always think this is terrible. This is terrible because his family suffered and so forth. But more people suffer when somebody has a heart attack. Everybody around them suffers. So here is the people who also suffer, right? This is the cast of Better Call Saul right here. Every one of them was suddenly out of a job. They all had families. They had no income. Sure, you can say, well, they can get another acting job. Yeah, in about a year or 6 months. So they have 6 months with no income, right? No future. So when somebody has a heart attack, everybody around them suffers also. That's why heart attacks are so terrible. Here, to get very close to home, this is one of our faculty. When I was in training for endocrinology, we had only 2 faculty members in endocrinology, only 2 endocrinologists, Phil Eaton and Glenn Peak. And Glenn Peak was a terrific pediatric endocrinologist, a great teacher, and died on Christmas Day of a massive heart attack at the age of 50. If you look at the years, at the age of 50. I can tell you we are losing our people in our community to this disease, and it's totally preventable, totally preventable. And these are tragedies beyond explanation. These are just terrible. So you think, well, that's bad. What about your kids? Well, let me show you how your kids can be influenced. I got this out of the newspaper, the Albuquerque Journal. This is Steve Maraska. He's principal of the elementary school. He died of a heart attack. This is his family. You can see his wife here on the left and 3 kids. They now have no father, no income. What a tragedy. This is a tragedy that's totally preventable. Now, I'm just going to finish up saying, I don't want to ruin your whole day, just most of it. What about your travel? Everybody here flies out of New Mexico and into New Mexico. We have a wonderful airport here. Well, here's the bad news, as though I haven't given you enough bad news. Take a look at this. Now, when you last landed in Albuquerque and your plane did this, you probably said, well, that was a little gust of wind, Well, if you look at this picture carefully, let me point something out. This guy's at the wrong end of the runway. He's at the wrong end of the runway, not at the start of the runway. He should be turned around. This is a disaster in the making, right? And you're probably saying this never happened. So I cut something else out of the paper. I'm sure everybody here has flown once or twice on American Airlines, and it's no different than any other airline. And this is interesting because a flight from Dallas to Albuquerque, 1353 at 3:30 in the afternoon, 2 miles from landing, the captain declared an emergency due to a medical issue because the first officer who had a heart attack, and he was at the controls. Upon landing, the plane taxied to the gate, CPR was administered, and the first officer was pronounced dead. Now, if this wasn't 2 miles out, and this was during that landing, like the picture I showed you, everybody in the plane would be dead. Everybody in the plane would be dead. So this can affect you. Heart attacks affect you, whether directly or indirectly. They can affect you through your whole lifespan. Okay, now I'm gonna show you another video here.
For all the problems of the way medicine is run in this country, the ultimate obstacle in the scan's path is that it lacks official approval. Then, in October 2012, after all the years of opposition, the American Heart Association finally relent and issue a statement saying that coronary artery scanning is beneficial.
Breathe in. Hold your breath.
Yes, I feel vindicated. I'm just happy that we were working on something that turned out to be valuable.
Well, I mean, so, you know, there's this old saying that truth passes through 3 stages. First, it is ridiculed, then it is violently opposed, finally it is accepted as being self-evident.
The data really does speak for itself. And when the American College of Cardiology and the American Heart Association signs off on it and says it's reasonable to use it, then the remaining naysayers are just a voice wandering in the wilderness.
We could have gotten there, in a perfect world, we could have gotten there in 3 to 5 years. We'd all gotten behind it in the beginning.
Well, and so what?
Well, how many lives do you think would have been saved if we'd done it in 1990, what we're doing now in 2013?
And the answer is?
In the 30 years since coronary artery scanning was invented, over 4 million people have died without any warning. That's the equivalent of half the population of New York City dropping dead. And most of these people could have been saved.
Okay, I'm just gonna finish up now, and just tell you one of the things Philip and I and a group are doing. We formed this non-profit organization. It actually doesn't even have a budget, but the whole goal of it is to spread the word. And I have called every medical establishment in New Mexico and asked them one question: do you do calcium scanning? And you can see the green circles there are all the places in New Mexico that do calcium scanning. So you can see that no matter where you live, you can, you're probably no more than a 2-hour car ride, and maybe many times less of getting a calcium scan. So this test is widely available. And in a lot of places, like in Albuquerque, there's 3 or 4 places to do it. And so there's really no reason to not have your patients get this life-saving procedure. So the last question, the last slide I want to ask you is, who's in charge of everybody's fate? Are you in charge of your own fate? Are you in charge of the people you love? Well, there's only 2 things you need to know to stay alive. One is my email address. Okay, so you can email me and I can order you a calcium scan. All right. And the other one is your LDL cholesterol level. Now, the amazing thing to me is that if I asked everybody in this audience how many people knew what their LDL, probably only 1 or 2% would know. And yet everybody in the audience knows your phone number, knows your height, knows your weight, knows your address. None of those numbers are keeping you alive. The only number keeping you alive is your LDL cholesterol. And yet nobody knows it. Nobody knows it. I have never been able to understand that. The most important number in the world to everybody in the room is your LDL cholesterol, and nobody knows what it is. I hope this presentation has at least been thought-provoking. I've really enjoyed being able to talk to you. I consider it a great honor to be able to speak to you, because this is a wonderful community that we're living in. And for sure, we want them all to be healthy and stay alive. So basically, I just want to thank you very much for listening to this presentation. And I will be glad to stay up here as long as anybody has any questions. So thank you, Greg, for actually running my mind.
Thank you, Dr. Shaker. Yes, we will be taking questions from the audience. We will also be taking questions from those online via the QA function. So if you have a question in the audience, just go ahead and raise your hand and we'll have someone run the mic to you. So that way also the audience on Zoom can hear us.
Thank you so much, Dr. Shea. This was a wonderful presentation. You've got a new career.
Thank you.
Yeah. So how often do you need to get this? You said something in your presentation about 5 years. Now, if I had this test, which my PCP through the UNM system, I have to say, because I used to work here, recommended it. So I went to the Heart Institute, I think is where they gave it. I don't even think it cost me anything. I guess it was my insurance. But now, do I have to have it every 5 years? So that's my main question. And the second one is,
Well, let's take one question at a time, but, okay, that's a very good question. How often should you get a coronary calcium scan? Well, that's the good news. If your score is 0, we don't recommend any treatment, and therefore you should repeat it in 5 years. Just like you get a colonoscopy, let's say every 5 years or something. If you have a positive score, you never have to get it again. What you need is treatment, because the calcium doesn't disappear, it stays there. So calcium score never starts something positive and goes to 0. So the nice thing is, once it's positive, maybe not be nice because you have some plaques, but you can reverse all that plaque with appropriate pills. You only need to get it every 5 years if it starts out at 0. So it's better than a colonoscopy where you got to get it every 5 years no matter what.
so if it's 0, you repeat every 5 years. If it's a score of some average, then you don't have to get it.
No, you get a score. The question is what kind of score you get. You get a numerical score. If the score is 0, where you see you have no calcium, you have no plaques, then the data in the literature clearly shows you don't need it for 4 or 5 years. Because nobody turns positive for the first 3 years after a 0 score. But at 4 and 5, the actual data shows that at 4 years, 15% of people who were originally 0 turn positive. At 5 years, 25% of people will be positive who were originally 0 score. So if you have a lot of risk factors, like if you have diabetes or you smoke or you have hypertension, we would recommend 4 years. If you have no risk factors, we recommend 5. Sure.
Today, we have, what are the 2 tablets? You mentioned the statin and one of them.
Okay, let me just, I didn't have time to go over treatment and I could have spent another 30 minutes talking about that. There's 2 tablets. They're both generic. They're both dirt cheap. All right. One's a statin, but it's not any statin, right? There's only one statin you ought to be taking if you're taking a statin, and that's called rosuvastatin. It's the most potent with the least side effects. And at the dose we use, which is always 10 milligrams, there are no side effects. If you look at large double-blind types of trials, when they use 10, there's no side effects. And the other one is ezetimibe, which has been around for 30 years, has absolutely no side effects, and there's only one dose, and it's 10 milligrams. And both of them you just take once a day. They're long-acting. And so there's no side effects. We've had none of our people on these drugs get any side effects. And we've had 120, actually more by now, take these pills, and there's no side effects. So we keep the doses low, so there's no side effects, and they're cheap. And probably, I mean, your insurance company will cover them for sure. But if you have to pay for them, it's about 30 cents a day. Compared to a heart attack, which is 100,000.
What is the best time of the day?
Yes, the question is, what time of day should you take the medication? If you actually looked at the data, the old statins that should never be used anymore, you needed to take in the evening, because most of your cholesterol, believe it or not, is produced at night when you're asleep. But these drugs are so long acting, they also last 2 to 3 days. You can take it, and that's any time of day you can take these pills. It's convenient. Morning, it doesn't make any difference. So it's very easy to take, no side effects, cheap. I mean, they're cheaper than a lot of the vitamins people take. And they certainly keep a lot of people alive. I'm sure you're taking them correctly if you're taking it. The only bad way is not to take it.
We have another question online. My A1C is steady at around 6.6, but under your medications and guidance, my LDL cholesterol has been in the 30s for about 3 years now. Would I still benefit from a calcium scan?
All right, if you plan, I don't know why you're, the question is, if my LDL cholesterol is in the 30s, do I need a calcium scan? All right, our goal is to have LDL cholesterol the same as when you were born, which is 50 or below, because the data is very clear in the literature that if you're 50 or below, you will reverse all the plaques you have. So this person who asked the question with a 30 is certainly reversing all the plaques. Now, we would not normally do a scan as long as that person continued to do what they're doing to have a level of 30. Now, you can have a level 30 genetically. There are people who are born with very low cholesterol levels. And as you might guess, in their family history, there's never a heart attack anywhere. So there are some people who are lucky enough to have a real low cholesterol level. You don't need cholesterol for anything. It's a waste product. It's a waste product. You only need it when you were a fetus. That's when you really needed it. But since you all had it then, because you're all here, all right, you don't need it anymore. Every cell in your body can make all the cholesterol it might need for its cell wall. Cholesterol is good for the cell wall, but it doesn't need any circulating around cholesterol. That's just garbage. Unfortunately, the garbage sticks to the vessel wall and causes heart attacks.
Dr. Shea, I'm one of your believers. I was wondering, this is such a great presentation. It turns 69 and sorry, 79.
We won't tell anybody.
A lot of friends that are either older or younger that have one particular 3 to 4 days in the morning. And lunch. Is it going to be available?
Yes, as I understand it, this will be available on the UNM website. And I'm sure you can contact any kind of information, Greg or whatever. I'm sure it'll take several days to get on the website, but it will be available to anybody who wants to watch it again.
This is being recorded and it will take a couple days to get it up. It will be available at research.unm.edu.
And I would encourage everybody to show it to your friends or whatever that would convince them to do something, because they do not have to have a heart attack. And it's the most biggest killer in New Mexico. I just can't understand. Any other questions?
Thank you for your very compelling presentation. I'm curious about the arguments made by the opponents in the integration of coronary calcium and calcium scans into insurance coverage.
I guess I'm not sure what the question is. We think, of course, just like Blue Cross Blue Shield realized that it saved them money. They're all insurance companies, but now they have to pay for it. So it's all in with the package, so to speak. What isn't in is the federal government for Medicare folks. We think it ought to be just like, since it is basically a scan of your heart, it ought to be in with all the other things the government pays for to prevent disease, like breast cancer and colon cancer and all these things that you can get covered by Medicare. Why they don't cover this is something that makes no sense to me at all. And we have written them, the Texas senators wrote Medicare. We're putting all the pressure we know on them. And they're always worried about their budget in Washington, yet this would save them millions of dollars. Millions of dollars. Billions of, let me just tell you how much heart disease costs in the United States every year. It's $350 billion. $350 billion is spent on heart disease in New Mexico. And you could say, we actually did a publication where we did the calculations, and you can save like $200 billion a year just by making this test free and giving free pills. You can save $200 billion, and yet you can't get the government to listen to you. You know, you just throw up your hands and say, you know, who's thinking in Washington? Right now, they're all fighting. They're not thinking.
What's your recommendation if I have a calcium score of 0 and an LDL of 200, and no other risk factors except for a female age 66?
Yes. So I have a couple patients like they're always young. If you have a cholesterol of 200, an LDL cholesterol of 200, you have a genetic problem. I can tell you that. So the first thing you do is get a gene test. And the reason you get a gene test is if it's positive, all right, you need to check your family members, all right, to make sure that they don't have really high cholesterol and get in trouble. All right. Then what we do with anybody that high, we know for sure that sooner or later they're going to get in trouble. So we treat those people with 2 pills that have no side effects that are 30 cents a day. All right. Because those people, and that's a very small group of people, I can tell you. I see them because I get referred to all the people with those kind of numbers. But if you look at the population, it's well less than 1% of people with that genetic evil. All right. So those people we start because we know they're going to get in trouble. And we're just trying to, you know, beat the odds. We don't want to have them have an event, and we're not, because we only do a calcium score every 5 years. Those are a different subset of people which we do treat.
Is there any benefit of a calcium scan for someone who's already had a heart attack?
The answer to that is, the question is, you've already had a heart attack. Is there any use for a calcium scan? And the answer is no. Because if you've already had a heart attack or any kind of cardiac event, we already know you have plaques in your arteries. You won't have a cardiac event without some plaques in your arteries. So the calcium scan doesn't tell us anything. What you need to do, and I don't see this happening very much, is to get your LDL cholesterol below 50. And I can tell you, I can do that for anybody in this room, whether you have a genetic problem or not, with what's available to me now. I can get your LDL cholesterol below 50. But I don't see that happening. I don't see that happening when I see these people. Their cholesterol is all about 90. Now, let me tell you something about a cholesterol 90. It's an interesting number. If you take 93,000 heart attacks in the United States that get to an emergency room before they die, and you measure their LDL cholesterol, it's 90. So we know 90 is not very protective because 93,000 people with a 90 level had a heart attack. So 90 is not where you want to be. We know at a level of 70, we got 20 studies all showing this. At a level of 20, at a level of 70, 50% of people get better and 50% of people get worse, more plaques. That's why we choose 50, because it's a bell-shaped curve. If you're below 50, you will be getting rid of those plaques. And it's easy to get below 50. Easy. But I don't see that happening. So just taking a statin, unless you have a program, you probably won't get below 50. But if I was going to give another talk, I can tell you how to do that. But I'm not paid past 6 o'clock. I don't know how it works. Just a what?
Start over on a different day when you get paid again.
I'd be more than happy. Now, I am giving another talk, which will include treatment to OSIS, you know, that organization. If you look in their catalog, which just came out, you'll see me and I will talk about treatment in that talk. So, and that's, I think, in August, but it's in the catalog, it's big part sign there. So I give talks around, anybody to listen to me, I'll give a talk to. It's just that nobody ever invites me. So what can I say? Well, listen, it's getting late. And I want to thank everybody for listening to me. I had a great time. I hope you enjoyed the video. I wish everybody the best of health. Thank you.
Associate Vice President Research Hunter Hall, Grant Hall. Closing remarks.
Folks, I know the clock is ticking here, and somebody's not getting paid, so I want to make sure and make this quick. So this is a perfect example of how this community engaged research lecture should work. It connects to the people of New Mexico, and that's one of the things that this award recognizes, are people who connect to our communities in New Mexico. And this was a wonderful presentation, and one that caused me to think a lot. I'm right in that age group. So the good news is that season 6 of Better Call Saul just came out on Netflix. I just noticed this last night. So that's the good news. So I just want to wrap up by saying a special thank you to Dr. Shade. I'd like to give him one more round of applause. I'd also like to thank our members of the UNM Faculty Senate Research Policy Committee. And these folks kindly offer their time to select among many qualified, excellent applicants, people like Dr. Shade to come up and give a talk. And I want to recognize our staff in the Office of the Vice President for Research who put together this lovely presentation, and our counterparts at HSC who helped us pull all this together and organize tonight's event. And then I would really like to thank our research community broadly for advancing research at the University of New Mexico. This again is a perfect example of why the efforts we have here are so important to the state, to the nation. So we do have a gift for Dr. Shade. Unfortunately, FedEx didn't make it with the gift. And so it's on the way, and we will be presenting that gift to Dr. Shade very soon, as soon as we get that put together. But I'd like to thank you all for attending tonight's lecture and joining us to honor the achievements of Dr. Shade for this 8th annual Community Engaged Research Lecture. Thanks very much.
Thank you again all for attending. Learned a lot of very important things today. Another important thing, there is refreshments in the foyer across the walkway here. So please join us for refreshments after this lecture. And that's it. Thank you. Oh, there's no Big Macs. No Big Macs. Thank you again, everyone. Thank you, Dr. Shade. Have a good night. Turn it off.